honestly, you don't even need to be a statistics person to look at the data and be like, oh, clearly there's a bias, because I did just put the numbers together, average placement and percentage of times they place for a male team, a co-ed team, and an all-female team. The average placement for the males was about 3.4. So obviously top 3 teams place. 3.4 means they're getting really close to placing single time they're at a competition. Their percentage of placement was over 50%. It was like 55, 56 somewhere. So they're placing at over half the comps by being an all-male team. A co-ed team, which is like the baseline, right? Because a majority of the teams are co-ed, placed around 4.5, 4.6 on average, which makes sense. They placed somewhere around 40-ish% of the time, 42, 43-ish% of the time. An all-female team, their average position was 5.6 to 5.7, and they placed about 30% of the time, like 30, 31. So just with those numbers, ignoring everything else, clearly all male teams have an advantage and all female teams have a disadvantage. Looking at historical data on that sense, or like anecdotal data even, of like, hey, look at the national competitions. There's been 2 all-female teams that have ever placed at this point, Buckfu and Drexel Jellick. I'm less connected with DDN now, of course, than I was outside of judging and mentoring. So the highest levels, the legends level of DDN, sorry, I don't pay attention to you guys as much. I'm focused on the tier just under legends now. All male teams, like we saw, 2 straight years, and the OSU all male team. Now the new all male team, what's their new name now? Origin. Yeah, OSU Origins won last year. An all male team alone has won 3. UTD Roughtars, Texas Deluxe is an all male team. There was some team from Pennsylvania back in the day that got behind the old OSU team, the Philadelphia-based team. Broad Street Buzzshots.
They're still around.
They placed at Legends, I think it was, back in the day also. So it's just one of those that, like, just looking at it, just looking at what I just mentioned, it was just like all these all-male teams are placing at national competitions. I had never been, and this has nothing to do with Origins. I want to make that clear because it's about to sound like I'm going to insult the heck out of them, and it's not, and I want to make that clear. But I had never been more disappointed as in the circuit as when OSU Origins won last year. Because it just felt like when it came, if there was like 3 teams that were even and one was an all-male team, the all-male team was always going to win. And I had felt like, since the old OSU team hadn't won in a while, and like I said, I didn't think their Channel Chasers performance was good enough to win. I thought both Buckfu and Chelka were better that year. But that old team disappeared. The new team was here. An all-male team hadn't won the circuit in a bit. And I was like, okay, maybe it's like normalizing a little bit. And then obviously, like I said, Drexel Jellick placed. So I was like, okay, like this is a good thing. OSU Origins, were they great that year? Yes. I want to make that clear. Were they a fantastic team? Did they deserve to be in Legends? Did they deserve to place in Legends? Maybe. But did they definitely deserve to be at Legends? Yes. Did they deserve to win Legends? Were they clearly better than other teams there, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th place teams? And like I said, this is going to sound like an insult to OSU Origins and especially that year's team, and it's not. Like, I'm just using them as an example because they've been the most successful all-male team historically in DDN, or them and the old OSU team, if you combine them. Especially talking about a judge, the reason I ignore crowd reactions is because an all-male team could go up, be the least clean team and do one thing with high energy, and the crowd goes wild. And I'm like, did you miss the fact that a dude literally just fell over while doing that? Like, that wasn't hype, but the crowd will just go wild when it's an all-male team. A female team will be the cleanest and hit something hard, and you're like 5 people clapping. And a co-ed team, it depends on what the audience is feeling that day. Like, and I know the moment we talk about like, oh, all male teams, there's a bias, like people are going to roll their eyes and whatever. But like, I did the statistics. I'm not saying this because I'm sexist towards my own gender. I saw the numbers. All male teams clearly have an advantage. There was another all male team I judged that I'm not going to name the name of for obvious reasons, that I had either dead last in my ranking, got 2nd at that competition. So, it's just one of those things where I was just like, how is it that me and the other judges in DDN have this huge disconnect? And I cannot tell you why. I don't know why, the all-male teams have such an advantage, why the all-female teams have a disadvantage. I don't think it's just sexism. Not all of us are sexist. There's no way that's a thing. But I do think there's an issue. An all-male team will show up and their standard is lower for some reason. Because they have really high energy, the crowd's going to cheer louder. And that's that kind of thing. Whereas an all-female team, their standard is way higher. We've said as a team, this is our all-female segment. They're going to be amazing because they're way tougher than ours. I've said that when I was on Munzo. Our judges came back and said this to us, where it's like, that's an all-female segment. That choreo needs to be way tougher. And it's just one of those like, oh, hey, in the moment you don't realize what that means, but why does it need to be tougher? What if all the guys had Bollywood dance backgrounds and none of the girls did? Why would the girls segment need to be tougher choreo-wise? We need to make our standards even again. I don't think they are right now. If men do exactly what a co-ed team does and a female team does exactly what a co-ed team does, it's going to be male team, co-ed team, female team in that order as the statistics revealed, where it's just that's naturally what happens. And it's really unfortunate, and I hope it changes like as soon as possible. But so when I'm saying I was never more angry than when OSU Origins won, it wasn't that OSU Origins was bad or even necessarily worse than some of the teams they beat. It was I thought they were at best the same level of some of the other teams that placed, and they won because they were OSU Origins. They didn't win because they were the best team that day. They won because they had the name behind it. And that's not the first time I've said that. And like it's the highest level I've said that. There's a bunch of other competitions where I'm like, they won because this was their team name. They won because they're an all-male team, or they placed because they're an all-male team when I had them eighth. You know, that's the reason why, rather than, and like even the classical thing I mentioned with the judge earlier, all-male teams are significantly less likely to have classical segments because guys are less likely to be classically trained. We mostly don't do classical. And that's just not our thing, I should say. And you won't have that issue with like the classical judge of being like, no, their classical wasn't good. I'm going to make sure they're not placing. Whereas an all-female team would get screwed for the same reason. It's not just they're men, they're women, and this is the standard. They're more likely to have classical, and classical judges are much harsher. I can promise you that's true with the judges I've judged with. Classical judges are much harsher, and hey, like the women's teams are more likely to have classicals. It's not just they're men, they're women, the women get screwed. There's different reasons behind it, but I think we need to find a way to stop that. It's on the judges 100%. It's also on the rest of the circuit. It's on the audiences that are just, like I said, the guys do one thing, horrible cleanliness, but high energy, and the crowd goes wild. The women have perfect cleanliness, maybe like 1/10 lower of energy, and the crowd goes silent. It doesn't make sense to me as a judge watching something, and I was like, that was better than what the guys did, but the guys had the biggest cheer of the night. I don't get it, kind of thing. And it, like I said, it's a problem. It's something that needs to be fixed. I don't really know how to fix it. I wish I did. If I did, I would have already been trying to implement it from behind the scenes. And, you know, I definitely, there's certain critiques I've heard beyond just the classical one. You can tell as someone who's had that thought process a lot, did the statistics and is upset I couldn't release the article to maybe get DDN to change. It's really upsetting every time I see a male team, even in level with the co-ed all-female team, getting pushed up just because they're a male team.
I think there's definitely a lot what you said, but like it's interesting because at the same time, there's what you talk about is so far like bias, kind of male dancers usually have this bias of like lesser standards, lesser, or like their dance is more powerful and more engaging, but that's not necessarily all the time true. Like one example I can think of myself is that UTD Rough Drive, they did their classical segment this year, or like one segment. But if I think about it, like I think Pit Masana this year, and like their lead won best lead from that one classical segment where they all rearranged and did like a similar thing. But that does not come to my brain as much as the male version, even though the female version was at a higher level and was more complicated. And it's just like I guess an implicit bias like we all have to like bring to the discussion too. And like other talking points like in Bhangra, I think some discussion has been around that in the Bhangra podcast about like are boys held to higher standard versus girls. Sometimes boys Bhangra teams place more than girls do. And then at the same time, like I think that's also brought to classical. Because in classical dance, like when you saw Chuck Desi, like I was blown away by the talent that these people have. But like classical is not necessarily always appreciated as much. I wonder if that's because it's seen as a girls' dance form, even though boys and girls can both do it. When boys do it, why is it held to like, whoa, it's so much better? Of course, we recognize how hard it was, but shouldn't we really like, evaluate it at the same standard?